without giving it a whole lot more thought, being in the room with the President of the United States as though I was there by myself. And I've got my 5 minutes of conversation and there ain't nobody else in the room listening.
Mr. Michael J. Blum, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
So you have had a big impact on my career, as a commercial real estate broker. In 2014, I was in Leadership McAllen, and it was Economic Development Day, and you sat on a panel. And I don't remember all of the details of what was said on that panel, but at that time I was a banker, and I envisioned being on the real estate side, but the residential aspect of it didn't really catch my eye. I liked commercial, but I had never been exposed to a true commercial professional until that day. And as you know, it was about a week later, we had lunch at Luby's, the one that's still open, still good, still got the Luann plate. And I told you that I wanted to get into commercial real estate. And you told me, I think that you can be good. The most important thing you need to focus on is getting experience, because that's what's going to set you apart. And you told me the first 5 years, you're not going to make any money, and you need to be okay with that. And I took that, put it on my shoulders and said, I want to do that. And 2 years later, I was licensed. And shortly after, a few years after that, we started a brokerage. And I'm still looking up to you and trying to catch up to all of your accomplishments. So I want to say thank you for that. In addition to everything else that we're going to talk about, you have made an impact on individuals in addition to the region. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so you have a long career where you have made a big impact on so many levels. We want to start with how you started in city planning. And one thing that I was reading about that I found really interesting is that you started with the city of Edinburgh.
Correct.
And the city of Edinburgh hired you as their city planner, and the city of Edinburgh had a city planner before McAllen did. Dive into that.
Well, actually, they hired me as an intern for one semester, graduate student intern, to work for the Model City Agency. And at the time, may he rest in peace, Joe Ramone was the executive director. And I came to Edinburgh with my wife and my new baby to spend one semester as an intern in Edinburgh, Texas. And something happened. I caught the eye of the mayor and the city manager. And within 60 days, they came to visit me and said, what are you doing when you're done with your internship? I said, I'm going back to A&M. I need to take 6 more hours to finish my master's degree in city planning. And they said, well, if you could find 2 graduate level courses at Pan American College, we'll make you city planner today. Well, beat me. So I called the graduate school at A&M and I told them what had happened, and they said, go find something at graduate school level, call me back and we'll say yes. And that happened. And okay, I became city planner, and that was within 60 days of me being an intern.
Wow.
And it put me in a position that was, to say the least, life-changing, because it started me off on a career 53 years ago.
What skill set or what did you bring to the table that you think the city of Edinburgh, the leadership saw that said, hey, we need to grab this individual?
Well, before Edinburgh and before graduate school, there was the United States Army. And I went in the Army in 1969 in anticipation of going to Vietnam, which is in full-blown glory. And so I signed up to avoid getting drafted. And I signed up to go to officer candidate school. But you got to go through basic and advanced infantry training first, which I did, and finally got orders to go to Fort Benning, Georgia. And it's a 26-week program to get your second lieutenant bar. 24 and a half weeks in, Nixon declared a reduction in force. And that affected all the branches of the United States military. And what it meant was you didn't have to take your commission. You could just go be an ops sergeant somewhere and not go to Vietnam. and do the last 11 months, in my case, as a battalion ops sergeant in Fort Hood, Texas, which is where I went.
Fort Hood, Texas.
And so the leadership training program in the United States military was a game changer for me. It taught me everything you could possibly want to know about leadership and what not to do, in preparation for war or in just preparation for life. And so that 2 years as an Army guy set me off on a path, and apparently some of that content was caught the eye of the mayor and city manager in Edinburgh, and the rest is history.
You know, the other thing that I find interesting is the city of Edinburgh was focused on having that position or department in city planning before McAllen, and McAllen was much bigger.
Oh yeah, it was before anybody. There was no city planners in any of the cities that I know of. So
you were in Edinburgh, obviously doing a good job, and you were recruited, invited to the city of McAllen, and they created a position for you.
That's correct. I was recruited because somebody at TxDOT met me in Edinburgh, liked what he saw, knew I was an Aggie, knew I'd been in the military, and knew the city of McAllen needed focused direction. And so he recommended that they call me, and that's what happened. And I got a call from Bill Shoup and the then mayor, Jack Wetzel, Broadway Hardware. And I got interviewed to be the first city planner of McAllen in '73.
Wow.
And that happened in the spring of '73.
Now, when you took that position on, it's not like you had a blueprint. It's not like you had a book and said, follow these instructions. We need to plan out McAllen. You obviously had a little bit of a foundation in Edinburgh, but that's different real estate, different assets.
You're right, except the city of McAllen in 1926 hired a guy by the name of E.A. Wood, who was a planning engineer, otherwise a civil engineer. And in 1926, he wrote a comprehensive plan for the city of McAllen.
1926.
1926. Nobody read it until 1973.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. As soon as I got my hands on it, I buried myself in the content and the brilliance of sections dealing with subdivision regulation and land use regulation, otherwise known as zoning, and off-street parking regulations, and things to make cities a better place to deal with the kind of problems that cities are going to have. And I took that blueprint, and by the first months after coming to McAllen, I started on the planning for the writing of a new zoning ordinance that had been written in '45. And I wrote the 1973 zoning ordinance. And then I wrote the subdivision regulations for the city of McAllen. They didn't have one. They had an engineering regulation of what engineers are supposed to submit, but it wasn't a subdivision regulation. It told developers how they're supposed to do what they do. And then that led to off-street parking regulations and mobile home park and land development, just all kind of stuff. And so I was in the room where it happened, and which you'll hear me say a lot.
You were in many rooms where a lot of things happened. So the city of McAllen, when it comes to planning, there's a master plan that was created in 1926. A few decades later, you open it, you do the research. Did that plan that was created in 1926, based off of what you were seeing in the 70s, did a lot of that happen? Did any of it happen naturally?
A lot of it happened. A lot of it happened because the business community that were the drivers in the city itself in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s were smart enough to know you can't just do things like the Wild Wild West. There's got to be organization, and you got to have plan development. And so fortunately, the city had good leadership, good professional leadership, as well as elected leadership. And I was lucky to show up in '73 and had a blank slate and said, go do what city planners do. And that's what I did. And I did it from '73 to '79.
So, when you were city planner, did you ever have any innovative ideas or things that you wanted to pitch to leadership that you had to work a little harder on painting the vision for them to understand?
Well, at a point in time between 73 and 79, the federal government created a community development block grant program, which was a federal program designed to assist cities do things that they would not otherwise do because they would have the federal funds to fund it. And at that time, the city of McAllen had a housing program, but it didn't do anything with housing. We had an entire part of McAllen that was low income, substandard quality housing, and nobody was doing anything to correct the problem. And the land regulations said, if you want to do that, do it down here. Balboa Acres, South McAllen, downtown McAllen. Numbers of subdivisions that were 25-foot lots, and just not a whole lot of regulation. I saw that as an opportunity to change the way McAllen go. If it was good enough for a 25-foot lot in 19 whenever, then why can't we have townhouses on 25-foot lots? Well, we don't have a townhouse zone. Well, let's write one, and then people who are not poor can live on a 25-foot lot, and it's now known as Brick City.
Brick City.
Our Waterwalk, or lots of other places, came about as a result of that. In that same time frame, the need to do housing rehabilitation, neighborhood rehabilitation, came about, and the idea of affordable housing services, McAllen Affordable Housing, became an idea, and the federal funds provided a mechanism to provide financial assistance to people at the lower end of the economic spectrum to be able to put in windows that actually opened and closed. It wasn't just cellophane.
Yeah. So let's talk about public housing. So every city has a bottom 20%, a bottom 30% of the population in terms of income.
Right.
And so everyone has to live somewhere.
Right.
And a community's strength comes from its people. You can have people that contribute to society or people that don't contribute to society. So talk to us about housing and why you saw it as important to provide that service in a community or in this community or in any community.
Well, again, going back to those days, prior to my arrival, McAllen had some public housing, the old traditional public housing, but it hadn't had any in quite a number of years. But the problem was pretty present in South McAllen and in downtown McAllen, the suburbs around downtown McAllen. The colonias, they were not known as colonias then, they were just subdivisions that didn't have curb and gutter streets, or in some cases water and sewer. And so the need for more public housing was pretty evident. And it took a while to get the political leadership and the federal government on the same page. And ultimately that happened, and more public housing got built, and people who were otherwise unable to afford to live in a owner-occupied single-family home at least would have an alternative from what they were living in, which was not exactly safe, sanitary, and decent.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of, we'll call that a social net program, assistance to the community. The best stories that come out of those housing facilities are the stories of people that were able to finish going to school or get additional certificates, raise their wages and salaries and move and be able to buy something or rent something in a different area.
That's right.
But having decent housing in your community for everyone, I think it's a really important aspect of city planning that I think cities across the country are dealing with. The cost of housing is at an all-time high. Okay, so 1973 to 1979, your city planner. After that, talk to us about your next level of growth with the city of McAllen.
Well, 73 to 79, I became assistant city manager in the latter part of 78-ish and into 79. And because of the Community Development Block Grant Program, created McAllen Housing Services, Inc., that later became McAllen Affordable Homes, which is now countywide and maybe even bigger than countywide.
It's a giant.
It's a giant thing. It's got $50 million portfolio of quality housing. They're actually doing subdivision development to build affordable homes for people who can afford a home. They just can't afford the traditional affordable home because it's too expensive. And so somewhere in the late 1970s, 79-ish, I got an itch. And the itch was to go into a different direction and to get out of the city government world into some other arena. And I'm not sure whether it was my choice or it was somebody else's choice, but that's what I did. I created a consulting company called Michael J. Blum Company. I couldn't imagine a better choice. And promoted myself as a development services specialist. That I knew how to make things happen, but I didn't need the regulatory environment at City Hall to constrain me. And so that took place. But I needed an income. I couldn't just do it as Michael J. Blum Company. And so at that time, local general contractor, Max Burkhart, who owned a company called Valcon, and he had an architect working with him at the time who was a friend of mine, Mike Rabinowitz. And Mike is an AIA architect. And we were compadres. And so I went to work for Max in a consulting capacity as a planner for the architectural side of Valcon construction. And between Mike Rabinowitz and myself and Max Burkhart, we set our eyes on trying to do the best we could to facilitate economic development through the McAllen Foreign Trade Zone and the McAllen Economic Development Corporation to provide design services and construction services to building buildings for companies that were going to come to town. And a lot of the buildings, the original buildings in the Foreign Trade Zone, were MBA Architecture, Mike Blum Planner, and Max Burkhart Construction, Valcon, that happened, they emerged in those 79 to 87, 88 timeframe. Somewhere along the way, I got identified as somebody who can make things happen. And there were about 10 men in McAllen, several of whom are farmer bankers and just business people. One of them was a president of a division of an oil company. His name is George McVeigh. And there's a street in the Sharyland Plantation, or near the Sharyland Plantation, George McVeigh Drive. And they put together a recommendation that I should be selected as the Volunteer Industrial Developer of the Year for the state of Texas. The Texas Industrial Development Council had an annual event, and people were nominated, and I was selected as the Viddy Award winner for 1988. That, like so many other things that had previously happened, was a big time game changer, because it gave me the good housekeeping seal of approval. I can do economic development and earn a living doing it.
Yes.
I can take the development services idea and transform it into helping others, McAllen cities, Mission cities, Far cities, and other communities in the Rio Grande Valley to do what we did in McAllen. And so I created Michael J. Blum Company Development Services Group, but I didn't have any money because I was leaving Max Burkhart.
Not yet.
Yeah. And so I went to see one of the people who wrote the letter, Ernie Williams, who at the time had just replaced Glenn Roney at McAllen State Bank. And McAllen State Bank was about to become First City Bank. And I went to him and I said, Ernie, this is what I want to do. Here's my business plan, but I need an office and I need an income to do this. I can't just go out and kick the street and make things happen. He says, we'll put you on as a retainer and we'll give you an office on the 13th floor. Oh yeah, and by the way, when I need you to talk, I'm going to call you and you're going to talk about the things you can talk about.
For the bank.
For the bank. Well, shortly thereafter, the chairman of the board of First Bank of Chicago, who bought First City Bank, came to town. And Ernie put me in front of him and said, tell your story.
I said, talk.
Talk. And so I did. And at the time, I was in the process of negotiating with Hunt Oil Company to do a master plan on what became the Sharyland Plantation. They owned it. And when Mr. Abood heard the name Ray Hunt, his ears perked up because he'd been trying to get Hunt business for years. And he saw an opportunity. And he says, what is your company? I said, it's Michael J. Blum Company. And what's the subtitle? A Development Services Group. What do you think about First City Development Services Group, Michael J. Blum, president? I said, oh, that means I'm working for you. He said, yeah, we'll pay you a salary, and you can have your office, and you can do what you do, but you'll do it under the bank umbrella, and help me get something with Mr. Hunt. Okay. 30 seconds later, I am now president of First City Development Services Group. I was in the room where it happened. I admit I helped make it happen, but I was there, and that going backwards is a whole bunch of rooms I was in that things happened, and I was there either to facilitate or to orchestrate.
People talk a lot about success coming to you and you just make it happen. I think that you having that street credit for being able to make things happen, get into a room when you need to get into a room, but most importantly, because a lot of people have that skill set to be able to get into the room or get in front of the person. But when it comes to communicating and getting a point across and telling them something that they may not know, well, that's where a lot of people lack. And I think that your early start in city planning, in the military, and just life, that comes at us that we have to survive, I think that is the core foundation of what springboard you. Because if you weren't in city planning, how much would you know about development?
Not a lot.
And you mentioned something, the term economic development. Talk to us about that industry at that time. How was it in existence? Did cities have economic development corporations? Because it really, I think, started an idea of like, hey, well, who's helping the cities grow?
Well, at that time, again, late 70s, early 80s, the McAllen Foreign Trade Zone had been created. It was one of the very first foreign trade zones in the United States that was created. And it was created because there was an opportunity for the city to grow an industrial base by providing the things that foreign trade zones did, which was duty-free ports of entry. That was the major driver, duty-free ports of entry. Now, this is before the Far Bridge was even a dot on a map. The only bridge was Hidalgo, and it was not designed for heavy cargo.
It was pedestrian.
It was a vehicular and pedestrian bridge. But Hidalgo was just south of the McAllen intersection of Military Highway and 10th Street.
It just worked.
It just worked. And it worked for a number of years until the velocity of business outgrew the capacity of the infrastructure. And there needed to be a new bridge. And the city of Far started making rumbles about building a bridge. But that didn't happen in the 70s. And it didn't happen in the 80s. It was really after 1990 that the Far Bridge actually became a bridge on paper. It hadn't been built yet. Well, backing up just a little bit, I mentioned Sharyland Plantation. I had the opportunity, because of Mr. Abood, to become a consultant to the Hunt Oil Company, and in the course of doing so, discovered by a presentation by the then farm manager, Harry Shimotsu, Japanese-American farm manager for the Hunt Oil Company's farming operation, has properties all over the valley. And Harry took me on a tour, and we drove down Military Highway, and we took a four-wheeler, and we went across the floodway, and we got to the south side of the floodway, and went on the other side of the levee, and we drove to the river. And that's where I said, oh my God, if there was ever a place for a future bridge, this is it. It's west of Far. It's south of Mission, and it's on the river. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know if you build it, they will come. And so I got back to the city of McAllen. I went straight to the city manager and the mayor, and I said, look at what I found. And that started the discussion about going after a presidential permit, which I got hired by the city to go after. And that was in 1990, 91.
You mentioned, you've mentioned something in the past in writing where you say the border was not a constraint, it was an opportunity.
Correct.
And so, you know, in today's political climate, you know, being on the border, it has a stigma behind it, but being boots on the ground and understanding the economic impact that one bridge, let alone 13, has on not only a region, but the state and the country.
Right.
None of that would have happened if you don't get the bridge done. So talk to us about how you saw Mexico and as an opportunity. It was already happening, but obviously that infrastructure, that bridge that was holding back really big growth, it needed to happen, but it's not an easy thing to do.
No, and it took a number of years before the city of FAR got their presidential permit to build the bridge that they're now about to double the size of. It's about to be open soon, like next week or next month. That's going to give them the capacity to not just be the number one port of entry for agricultural products, but the number one port of entry for a whole lot of other stuff, because they're going to have the infrastructure in place,
the capacity
for major cross-border transportation of all manner of manufactured goods and agricultural products coming in from Mexico. 1990, 91, when the idea of the future now named Anzalduas Bridge came about, the FAR Bridge hadn't been built yet. And I was just trying to get in front of it, but I was never going to get in front of it because it was getting closer to being a permitted process. But things happen. 1992, presidential permit application was submitted to the United States with the State Department. And I spent 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, traveling all over the place on behalf of the city in my consulting capacity. And then Ruben Hinojosa, our congressman, did something and got the President Clinton's eye, and he took him with him to go see President Zedillo in Mexico City, to have a Spanish-speaking congressman with him in Mexico City. And that took place. And they were on Air Force One coming back from Mexico City, and the president comes out to the congressman and says, "Congressman, you just did a great job. I don't know what you said, but you did a great job. What can I do for you?" And he says, "Come to the McAllen, meet with the business community. There's things you need to know about, but you need to see it to understand it." Well, in January 1998, a year later, that meeting took place. And I was one of 4 people given the opportunity to have a private conversation with 20 people in the room. McAllen, then President of Economic Development Director for the city, Wanda Garza, Vita, Bonnie Gonzalez, myself. And we each had 5 minutes. And my 5 minutes was to talk about the importance of the presidential permit for what was then an unnamed bridge, but we called it the Anzalduas Bridge for lack of a better name because
the family.
And we called it the Anzalduas Bridge and Interstate 2 and Interstate 69. The idea of an interstate highway was just that. It was just an idea. It hadn't happened yet. Designation of interstate highways in the Rio Grande Valley had not happened. And I'm sitting in front of the President of the United States for 5 minutes. I got to talk about what I wanted to talk about. That's what I talked about.
So let's paint the room. So where did you meet?
In the 8th floor of the Embassy Suite.
Which is now Doubletree. So you meet in that room. The city of McAllen says, "Hey, you have 5 minutes for your pitch," right?
The city of McAllen didn't say it. Ruben Hinojosa said it.
Congressman Hinojosa. The congressman. Okay,
this was his meeting.
Okay, so okay. This was a regional project.
It was a regional project. In the room where it happened, Glenn Roney, Leo Montalvo, mayor, John David France, mayor. Bill White, former mayor of Houston, then Democratic Party chair of Texas. Myself, Mike, Bonnie, Yvonne. And there were some other people in the room whose faces I can't remember their names, but I know who they are. And then there was Reuben's staff who was sitting next to him. And so I've got this 5 minutes of, oh my God, to talk about this to the President of the United States. And when I got done, I said, Mr. President, we don't need you to do anything. We just need a presidential lift. You just need to tell your people this is important to you. And if you say that, then this thing will move lightning speed. Well, it did. 18 months later, a delegation from the Rio Grande Valley, not just McAllen, went to Washington, D.C. to have a meeting at the White House in the Roosevelt Room. And I was there.
Another room you were in.
Another room I was in. And coincidentally, I was wearing a tan suit and a red tie, the same tan suit and red tie that I wore in my presentation to the president.
It was good luck. It was good luck at that point.
I don't know why I did it. I just did. And so he came out, presents to Reuben and to the mayors the actual document, the presidential permit, congratulated everybody on what they had accomplished, thanked them for the opportunity to do what he did, and then he walked the room to shake everybody's hand. And he finally got to me, and I reached out and I grabbed his hand. I said, Mr. President, I can't tell you how proud I am to be here. I said, you were in McAllen a few months ago, and I presented to you the idea of this project, and here I am, and we got it done. He said, yeah, I remember your presentation, and I remember the tie. Well, it knocked me over. You wouldn't say you remember the tie if you didn't remember the tie.
Exactly.
And so if that's one of those, oh my God, I was in the room where it happened.
And so, the project is still ongoing.
Okay, that was in '99.
That was in 90. But you started the process
in 1990.
In 1990.
Okay, in 2009, the Anzalduas Bridge opened for business. Today is 2026. In a couple of weeks, the second span, the cargo span, will open.
The one that we've been waiting for.
That's right. There's been no cargo passing at the Anzalduas Bridge since it opened. It was not designed for cargo. That's all went to FAR. When the Anzalduas Bridge opens for cargo, there's going to be a shift. Some cargo is going to go to the Anzalduas Bridge, and some cargo is going to go to FAR. And how that happens is ice and it's driven by where it came from and where is it going to. But 2026 from 1990, 1 or 2, that's a lot of years.
One brick a day.
That's how slow that process is. Donna has since had a bridge opening, and they got some major expansion happening there. The Mission Bridge, which is the Anzalduas Bridge, a big industrial development, has now broken ground with Killam development. They acquired the remaining Sharyland Plantation from the Hunts, and they've broken ground on a couple hundred acres of industrial development on the Anzalduas Highway, going north, which is Bryan Road, going north off of Military Highway and to the west of Bryan Road. And it's incalculable what the economic impact of that's going to be. But for the bridge, none of it would have happened.
You're obviously a planner, which means you probably forecast things visually. Like in a perfect world, if everything goes to plan, this is what we envision. What do you envision in the next 10 years with the Anzalduas Bridge?
Well, to some extent, the Killams have already cast the die. I mean, they've developed a master plan for the 200 or 300 acres that is their first phase. And when they finish that phase, then they'll go do another couple hundred acres. It's a process. It's not, it just all depends on the velocity of how many buildings need to get built for what purpose, and whether there's retail or residential. The economy, the economy of the marketplace will drive the decision of what to put where. Right now, it's a mixed-use development with lots and lots of land set aside for industrial and warehousing, cold storage, climate control, not dry storage, and a lot of, we'll say, retail type use. And residential.
I think there's about 9 million square feet of industrial space, being planned in the city of Mission alone. The city of FAR's bridge, I think it works for the region if every bridge focuses on its strength, right? And so the FAR bridge is going to be the produce bridge, right? Because they have the inspection facilities, right? And Anzalduas is not going to have those for produce. But what I mean by what do we expect the Anzalduas bridge to do in 10 years is what all this industry is going to bring in terms of jobs, manufacturing, logistics, and that entire area. Because Mission has a lot of space to grow. McAllen, I don't want to say we're landlocked. Over the years, that has been a term, right? But somehow, some way, McAllen just figures out how to acquire more land. But the public climate is very different. People don't necessarily want to annex themselves into cities because of the costs. I think right now, what we're dealing with is how do cities continue to grow, forecast, and plan 20, 30 years out while still taking care of today's costs? Because the common theme around most communities is we do not have enough money. And so as someone that has been in a lot of rooms to find solutions for things that need to take place, infrastructure is not something that you wait on for a crisis, you say. You do it before the crisis gets here. So just kind of putting all of that theme together, what do you think is the most important thing that cities need to be focusing on right now?
The greatest challenge all the valley cities have, and McAllen in particular, is water. The lack of water, the primary source of drinking water, potable water, is the river. And the treaty between the United States and Mexico to provide water from Mexico to put in the Rio Grande River so that it can then be pumped north to serve the water treatment plants that Donna and FAR, San Juan, Alamo, McAllen, Mission all draw from. And if we don't have a permanent solution to the source of water, we got a problem. Now, McAllen is actually in the process of building a water reclamation project where they're going deep water, underground water, North McAllen. I can't exactly remember how north it is, but it's pretty north.
Yeah.
And it's designed to provide a permanent source for fresh water treated. It's going to be expensive water. And if you get a water bill from the city of McAllen right now, it's got a $14 add-on cost to cover some of the cost of a $200 million reclamation project. And there's federal funds involved as well. But it's a big deal. And the city of McAllen, the McAllen PUB, of which I served on for 16 years, we didn't even think about these things when I was on. I left in '99. But the new leadership at McAllen PUB has been thinking about it. And they came across the opportunity and they decided we need to pull the trigger and get in front of the problem, because if not, we're going to be behind the 8 ball permanently. And so that's not a work in progress. It's a project in process. I can't speak to the other parts because I don't know enough about the Edinburgh and the FAR and the Mission situation, but we all share the same problem. And I suspect there'll be some solutions that'll take care of it. The region will grow. It will grow of its own volition. When I moved here in '73, there was no University of Texas. There was no Texas A&M University. There was no South Texas College. They're all here now, and they're growing like crazy. And those things will spur other institutions to come, and that will then spur other things to happen as well. It's unknowable how the healthcare industry, which again, when I moved here in 1973, McAllen General Hospital was a 150-bed hospital, and it was downtown where City Hall is. And that was it. There was a little bitty hospital in Edinburgh and a little bitty hospital in Mission. FAR didn't have a hospital. San Juan, Alamo, Donna, they didn't have a hospital. And now what do we have? We got Doctors Hospital at Renaissance, Driscoll Hospital, South Texas Hospital, and a bunch of others that I can't even remember the name.
A new hospital coming to
The
Tres
new hospital
Lagos.
coming up way north. They got 10,000 people, 15,000 people working in these hospitals, and they all need houses, they all need groceries, they all need water, and the infrastructure is being provided by the cities in which these things are located. Is it enough? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I think most consumers, citizens that may not have a lot of experience in development, they over the last 10 years have understood the importance of drainage. Having paved roads, water, accessibility to internet, fiber. That's a whole nother thing, right? Running fiber. Does your new development have fiber? Is it in the area? I think that we're always having to adapt and learn and innovate. And the important thing in our business and in any community growing itself is you don't know everything. And it takes a village to make things happen.
Right.
And it doesn't happen overnight.
Nope.
Slow and steady wins the race. Out of all the rooms that you've been in, which room experience has been the most gratifying to you?
Oh,
It's tough.
Without giving it a whole lot more thought, being in the room with the President of the United States, as though I was there by myself, and I've got my 5 minutes of conversation, and there ain't nobody else in the room listening. You can't compare that to much of anything. To have the opportunity and the platform and a listening ear to listen to what I consider to be pretty profound stuff in 1999 or 98 has manifested itself in a whole lot of things that have happened since. It's not, I didn't make it happen. I was just in a room where it happened. And I was in several other rooms following that helped to facilitate that development. Serving on the McAllen PUB for 16 years was certainly an educational opportunity. Receiving the video award from the Texas Industrial Development Council 10 years earlier than Clinton coming to town, huge. I mean, it put me in a position that I would never have been in but for 10 people, 10 business community leaders who saw enough in me as a young guy to give me the nod to be the recipient of that award, the statewide award. And I don't know what's next. I'm in my 80th decade, but I am my 401k. My primary business is real estate. I'm affiliated with a great organization, STX. We're affiliated with NEI Global. We're one of the largest nationally recognized global platforms for commercial real estate in the world. We have 328 offices. I don't know how many thousands of people scattered around the world, but NEI Global is present in McAllen, Texas. And I'm proud to be a partner in that organization. I got a great team of people that I work with and for. And we have great expectations for the next decade or two, and I'm hopeful to be here for at least part of them.
There's going to be a lot more rooms that you have to be in.
A lot of more rooms to be in.
I think that your ultimate success is being prepared going into all those rooms without knowing it. We don't always know what's going to happen in a room, what we have to be prepared for, but it seems like every room that you've walked into, you walk out with success or some level of success because you walked in prepared. And I think that says a lot coming from someone that started in the planning world. When it comes to anyone that is starting their career at the city level, what advice can you give to them? Because they might think, oh, I'm just a city planner, or I'm working here. What's my future career? That foundation of education can take any one of those individuals very far if they dedicate, what advice can you give to them?
Oh, that's a toughie, because you got to be in the shoes of the person that you're talking about, not knowing who you're referring to. All I can say is be prepared. You can't just decide, well, I want to be a city planner and go be a city planner. There's got to be something behind it that's going to drive you in that direction. I was raised in Houston, Texas, that had no planning. Mm-hmm. When I was, my father may he rest in peace. He was a practicing trial lawyer in Houston, Texas when I was a kid. And unknown to me, when the city of Houston decided they wanted to adopt zoning regulations, he was the principal attorney for the Cullen family that fought against it. And here I am getting my master's degree in city planning. Needless to say, we had some conversations because I was in graduate school learning about the merits of zoning regulation.
The importance of it.
Yeah. And so we had differences of opinion on that subject, but I didn't even know he had been involved. But that's the way things were in Houston, Texas in the 30s and the 40s, is the big money controlled the decision-making process, and the Cullen family was not interested in anybody telling what they could do with their land, period. End of conversation. Move on.
The importance of decisions and the long-term effects. Houston's doing okay, but it's definitely a different city to develop and build in.
Absolutely. It ain't easy.
Mr. Michael J. Blum, thank you so much for the time today. We had a lot of conversations. I look forward to seeing you in many other rooms, and I hope that very soon we can close some deals together.
Amen. From your mouth to God's ear.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.